"I own this house, Danny. Unless you want to be homeless, you'll let Emily come with me." That's what my brother said. My brother. After abandoning his newborn on my porch and vanishing for 21 years. And now, he wanted her back like she was a borrowed lawnmower. But that wasn't the worst part. He wasn't even her biological father. That's what I discovered the moment I checked the one thing he didn't count on. Proof. He thought I was the same, scared 24-year-old he left behind. He had no idea I'd built something stronger than blood, a wall of truth no lie could break. He gave me 30 days to hand over my daughter and my home. He should have given me a shovel. Because when this is over, I won't just bury his lies. I'll plant something that outlives them. And it starts now. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning starts the same, just me and Emily's empty coffee mug on the counter while she's away at college. Mark, my older brother, abandoned her on my doorstep when she was just days old, promising he'd return in a week. That was 21 years ago. I've documented every moment since. Doctor visits, school records, birthday cards, all filed away in weathered boxes that line my office shelves. The steam from my coffee curls up toward Emily's graduation photo. Her smile so bright against the worn, wooden frame. My late coach Carl always said good record-keeping was like building a fortress, and mine is ironclad. But let me start from the beginning. I've seen a lot of proud faces over the years, but none hit quite like Emily's when she walked across that stage. My hands were raw from clapping as she accepted her diploma, head held high under the summer sun. 21 years of midnight fevers, scraped knees and math homework led to this moment. You know that feeling when your chest could burst? That was me, right there. We settled into Romano's later that evening, our favorite Italian place just off Main Street. Emily was telling stories about her roommate's graduation mishaps, and I was savoring every laugh like it was aged wine. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, just like they did when she was 5 and I'd chase her around the backyard with a water hose. The bell above the restaurant door chimed. I didn't need to look up. The sudden tension in Emily's shoulders told me everything. There stood Mark, my brother, looking nothing like the desperate man who'd shown up on my porch 2 decades ago. His suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and that smile, practiced, perfect, and about as real as a $3 bill. Emily? His voice carried across the restaurant like he owned the place. My God, look at you. Emily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Uncle Mark? He pulled up a chair without waiting for an invitation. I've been keeping track of you, sweetheart. Couldn't miss your big day. I watched Emily's face cycle through confusion, curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite name. She asked careful questions about where he'd been, what he'd done. Mark had an answer for everything. Business ventures in Seattle, recent success in real estate, a spiritual awakening that made him realize what truly mattered. We should talk properly. I cut in, my knife scraping a bit too hard against the plate. Coffee at our place? The drive home felt like being trapped in an elevator with a stranger who knows all your secrets. Emily kept sneaking glances at Mark's car following behind us in the rearview mirror. Remember when you were a kid? And thunder would roll in the distance? That's how the air felt, heavy with something coming. Our living room hadn't changed much since Mark last saw it. Same worn leather couch, same family photos on the walls. He stood examining them while I made coffee, lingering on the shot of Emily's first ballet recital. I've made mistakes, he started, accepting the mug I handed him. Huge ones. But I'm different now, ready to be a father again. Again? The word tasted bitter. You need to have been one first. Danny. He sighed my name like I was still the kid brother who didn't understand grown-up things. I know 21 years is a long time. 2 decades and 3 months, I corrected. But who's counting? The timing wasn't right before. He pressed on. I wasn't right. But now, I've got my life together. Emily deserves to know her real father. That last bit stung worse than a wasp. I'd been there for every milestone mark in her calendar. Where was he when she had pneumonia at 8? During the heartbreak of her first boyfriend? The college application anxiety? The mantle clock ticked away, each sound like a hammer on my certainty. Emily sat quietly, hands wrapped around her untouched coffee. I'd like to take you to breakfast tomorrow, Mark said to her. Just us. There's so much to catch up on. Before Emily could answer, I stepped in. If you want to talk to my daughter, you'll do it here. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Under this roof. Something flickered in Mark's eyes then. Quick. Calculating. They darted to my desk in the corner where I keep important papers. The deed to the house was in there, filed away with 2 decades of Emily's life. Of course. He smiled, all charm again. Whatever makes everyone comfortable. The next morning's sunlight wasn't doing me any favors. It caught every wrinkle in Mark's crisp suit as he sat at my kitchen table, our kitchen table, like he was conducting a business meeting instead of a family breakfast. Emily had made her signature French toast, the way I'd taught her when she was 12. The smell of cinnamon and butter usually filled me with warmth, but today it just twisted my stomach into knots. You ever have one of those moments where everything familiar suddenly feels wrong? Like someone rearranged your furniture in the dark? Remember that summer we took the boat out? Mark was saying, cutting his French toast into precise squares. You must have been, what, 4 or 5, Emily? I don't really remember much before first grade, Emily answered quietly, pushing her food around her plate. I did, though. I remembered every single first steps on this very floor. First word, duck, of all things. First day of school. 21 years of memories in this house, and Mark was acting like he'd just stepped out for milk and came back with stories. Well, that's understandable, Mark said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. But we should talk about making new memories. And about some practical matters. The way he said practical matters made my coffee taste like acid. What kind of matters? Shared guardianship history, for one. He reached for his briefcase. Who brings a briefcase to breakfast? There are legal considerations we need to address. Shared? The word came out sharper than I intended. There's nothing shared about it, Mark. You left. Actually, Danny, he smiled that businessman's smile again. There's quite a bit we share. Including this house. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. I felt the floor tilt under me. Just a degree or two, but enough to know the world was about to shift. What are you talking about? You remember when you bought this place? Mark leaned back, completely at ease. You were young, just starting out. Needed some help with the down payment? The memory hit me like a sucker punch. He had helped. Insisted on it, actually. Said it was the least he could do for his little brother. That help, Mark continued, came with some paperwork. Paperwork that puts my name on the deed. I've worked construction most of my life. I know what it feels like when support beams start to crack. Show me, I managed. He pulled out a manila folder, slides it across my morning paper. It's pretty straightforward. Either we start discussing how to transition Emily back to her biological father, or, he spread his hands wide, taking in the kitchen, the house, our home. Well, let's just say, moving is expensive these days. My hands didn't shake when I opened the folder. They should have. But 21 years of fixing things teaches you to stay steady when things go wrong. The deed copy looked official enough. Dates, signatures, legal language that made my head swim. Emily sat frozen, her breakfast getting cold. The look on her face, God, I never wanted to see that look. Like she was trying to rebuild her whole world with pieces that suddenly didn't fit. I'll need time to verify this, I said, keeping my voice level. The construction foreman voice, the one that stays calm when things go sideways on site. Of course, of course. Mark stood, straightening his jacket. Let's have dinner tomorrow. Talk about finalizing a plan that works for everyone. I walked him to the door, watched him pause on the porch. His eyes lingered on the spot where he'd stood that night. Baby Emily bundled against the cold. Did he feel anything, looking at that spot? Or was it just another piece on his game board? After I locked the door, I spread the deed copy on my desk. Something about the registration numbers didn't look quite right. Too many digits in one section, too few in another. The kind of thing you might miss if you weren't used to checking permit numbers every day. Dad? Emily's voice made me turn. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight like she used to do when thunderstorms rolled in. Did you... She swallowed hard. Did you keep me from him? The worst conversations always start with, can we talk? Emily's voice carried that same weight now as she stood in the living room doorway. I nodded, gesturing to the couch where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies, doing homework, just being father and daughter. Mark, Dad. He told me some things today, she said, perching on the edge like she might need to run. The word Dad applied to Mark hit me like a hammer to the thumb. About letters he sent. About trying to see me. I rubbed my face, feeling every one of my 45 years. Let me guess. Letters I supposedly hid? Visits I turned away? She nodded, fingers twisting in her lap. He showed me pictures on his phone. Him at my school plays, my softball games. Said you always made sure he couldn't get close. Emily! I leaned forward, elbows on knees. You remember that oak desk in my study? The one with all those filing boxes? The ones you're always organizing? Yeah, come with me. In my study, I pulled out box after box, each labeled by year. These aren't just tax records. This is your life, sweetheart. Every report card. I opened one from 3rd grade. Remember Mrs. Henderson? She wrote here about your science project. The one with the growing beans? Emily's fingers traced the handwritten notes. I kept going, opening more boxes. Doctor visits, school pictures, citations from the library for all those horse books you loved. Program from your first ballet recital. You were the only sugar plum fairy who smiled through the whole thing. The memory of her tiny purple tutu made my throat tight. I kept everything, Emily. Not because I'm obsessed with paperwork, but because these are proof of presence, of being there. Her voice was small. But what about his letters? What letters? Emily, look at these. I showed her the neatly organized files. If there had been letters, they'd be right here. I document everything. You know that. Why would I hide just his letters? Her phone buzzed. Mark's timing couldn't have been better if he'd been listening at the window. She looked at the screen, then showed me. Photos of her at various school events, Mark apparently in the background. But something wasn't right. Look at the timestamps, I said. That one says 2010. But you're wearing your junior year volleyball jersey. You didn't start volleyball until 2015. Emily frowned, zooming in. Maybe it's just tagged wrong? Maybe. I kept my voice neutral. Or maybe someone's working very hard to create a history that wasn't there. She set the phone down, standing to pace the room like she did when working out tough calculus problems. I need time to think about all this. Of course you do. But Emily? I waited until she looked at me. That night he left you with me, I was scared. And yes, I was angry. But not once. Not once. Did I steal you or hide you? You were a gift I never expected, but always treasured. She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning. Can we all sit down together tomorrow? The 3 of us? I want to hear both sides at once. Absolutely. No more secrets. No more separate conversations. Okay. She paused at the door. But Dad, trust goes both ways. If you're hiding anything, I know, sweetheart. I know. After she went upstairs, I stepped out onto the porch. The night air carried that same bitter chill from 21 years ago. I pulled out my phone and dialed Carl, my old coach who'd known both Mark and me since high school. Carl, it's Danny. Listen, Mark's back, and something's not adding up. Call me when you can. I could use some perspective here. I'd barely hung up when Emily's phone buzzed again. From where I stood, I could see Mark's message. We should meet alone first, sweetie. Before anyone can interfere with the truth. Those words. Interfere with the truth. They hung in the air like smoke signals. 21 years of bedtime stories, skinned knees, and proud smiles could all come undone in one conversation. The next afternoon, I was sorting through Emily's high school yearbooks when the doorbell rang. A courier stood there with a certified letter, requiring my signature. The moment I saw Mark's lawyer's letterhead, my stomach dropped. You know that feeling when you're watching storm clouds roll in and you can taste the change in the air? That's what reading that letter felt like. 30 days. Mark was giving us 30 days before he'd file formal paperwork to contest both my guardianship and the house deed. The legal language was polished, but the threat was raw. My whole world could unravel in a month. I went straight to the kitchen and grabbed the calendar off the fridge. Each empty square seemed to pulse with new weight as I marked the deadline in red. Emily was doing homework at the table, and I could feel her eyes on me. What is it? She asked, closing her laptop. I sat down across from her, keeping my voice steady. Your father, Mark. He started formal proceedings. We have 30 days before he files to challenge both the guardianship arrangements and the house ownership. She set down her coffee mug, the one she'd made in ceramics class years ago. What exactly does that mean? It means we need to prove I've been your legal guardian all these years, and that this house is rightfully mine. Mark's claiming he has rights to both, and if you can't prove it, then we could lose everything we've built here. I watched her face carefully. But Emily, I need you to know, whatever happens with the house, you're 21 now. You get to choose your own path. She nodded slowly. I want to stay neutral until we know all the facts. Is that okay? Of course it is. You deserve the whole truth. I squeezed her hand. I'm going to put together everything I have. Photos, documents, the whole timeline. You can look through it all. After she went upstairs, I pulled out my old filing boxes and started building what I called my defense wall on the dining room table. 21 years of father-daughter life laid out in chronological order. Her first doctor visit, preschool registration, elementary school report cards. Each piece of paper was a brick in the foundation I'd built. The afternoon light was fading when I texted Carl again. Got a minute? Mark's playing hardball now. His reply came quick. Call me first thing tomorrow, 7 a.m. Got info you need. I started drafting questions for Mark, planning to meet him at that neutral cafe downtown, the one where Emily used to study during high school. Looking at my list, I realized how many gaps needed filling. Where had he really been all these years? Why come back now? And most importantly, what made him think he could erase 2 decades of absence with legal threats? The house grew quiet as evening settled in. I stood in the living room, looking at my defense wall of documents. The boxes and binders reminded me of how Dad used to stack sandbags before floods. Methodical, purposeful, each one placed just so. These papers were my sandbags against Mark's legal flood. Walking to the mantel, I grabbed a sticky note and wrote, "Day 1 of 30. No mistakes." Stuck it right next to the clock where I'd see it every morning. Right then, my phone lit up with Mark's name. "Danny, let's move up that cafe meeting. Tonight? No reason to drag this out." I glanced at my wall of documents, still only half organized. "I thought we said tomorrow." "Things change. 8 o'clock. That place Emily likes downtown." His voice had that same smooth tone from graduation night. "Unless you're not ready?" I could hear the challenge in those last 3 words. "I'll be there." The downtown cafe looked different at night. The fluorescent lights made everything feel stark and overexposed. Like one of those police interrogation rooms you see on TV. Mark was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table with his suit jacket draped over the chair like he owned the place. "Danny," he said, gesturing to the empty seat. "Coffee?" "I'm good." I sat down, noticing how he'd positioned himself to face the door. Old habits, maybe. "Let's talk about these papers you're planning to file." He leaned forward. "All business now. Look, I know you think you're protecting Emily, but I have rights here that were overlooked. This is about correcting past mistakes." "Mistakes?" My coffee mug would have shattered if I'd been holding one. "You mean the mistake of leaving your newborn daughter on my doorstep?" I was in a difficult position. He straightened his tie. "But I'm here now, ready to make things right. I have proof I tried to maintain contact." "Show me." I kept my voice level. "Every letter, every call log, every attempt you made to reach out over 21 years. Show me." "It's not that simple." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Some records were lost in moves, others—" "That's convenient." I remembered Emily's first steps, her first words, all those midnight fevers I'd sat through alone. "You know what wasn't lost? Every moment of actually raising her." The conversation circled like this for an hour. Mark kept throwing around legal terms. Parental rights, property claims, restoration of guardianship. But every time I pushed for specifics about his supposed attempts to stay in touch, he'd dodge with practiced smoothness. "Time's running out, Danny." He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. 27 days left. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I watched him leave, then sat there until the cafe started stacking chairs. Something about his confidence felt rehearsed, like he'd run this play before. The next morning, I was pouring my first coffee when Carl called back. His voice had that gravel rough edge I remembered from coaching days. "Danny, sorry about the delay. Had to check some old records to be sure." "About Mark?" "Yeah." He cleared his throat. "Look, there's something you need to know. Back before he disappeared, Mark was running schemes at the investment firm. Embezzlement. He had multiple identities, fake documents, the works." My hand froze halfway to the sugar bowl. "How do you know this?" "Because I was on the board when it happened. We never pressed charges, family name and all that. But we made him pay it back quietly and leave town." Carl paused. "Danny, if he's showing up with legal papers now, they could be fake." The pieces started clicking. The deed, the custody claims, everything. Wouldn't put it past him. Mark always had a talent for making lies look official. After hanging up, I sat at my desk and started mapping out a plan. I needed to verify everything. The deed chain, bank records from when the house was bought, Mark's whereabouts during Emily's first year. Each question went onto a fresh legal pad, creating a spiderweb of leads to chase. Emily came downstairs while I was working, backpack in hand. "I need some time to think," she said. "Going to stay at Jen's place for a bit." I nodded, fighting the urge to protest. "You'll be home for dinner?" "Promise." She hesitated by the door. "Dad, I just need space to process all this." "I understand, sweetheart." And I did. Sometimes the hardest part of being a father is knowing when to step back. After she left, I marked another X on the calendar. Day 3 of 30. Then I pulled out Mark's deed copy and set it under my desk lamp. Something about the notary stamp had been bothering me since yesterday. Now, with the bright light hitting it just right, I could see what was wrong. The format didn't match any county documentation I'd ever handled. 5 days into our 30-day countdown, and my living room looked like one of those detective shows where they pin everything to the walls. You know the type. Photos, documents, strings connecting the dots. Except this wasn't about solving a crime. This was about protecting my daughter. I'd been up since dawn, fueled by coffee and determination, sorting through 2 decades of memories turned evidence. Report cards, medical records, birthday photos. They spread across the wall in a timeline that told our story. Emily's first steps, her kindergarten graduation, the science fair project that won first place. Each moment stamped with a date. Each date a brick in the wall of truth I was building. Getting somewhere, you might ask. Well, that's where things got interesting. I'd pulled the property records for our house, tracking every transaction back to when I'd supposedly bought it with Mark's help. The dates caught my eye. Specifically, the 3-month period when the sale went through. According to the few Christmas cards Mom had saved, Mark was in Europe then, expanding the business. Funny how he could help buy a house while being an ocean away. The hospital records were next. I'd kept everything from that night. The intake forms, Emily's first checkup, even the little wristband they'd put on her. 21 years old now, but that paper still smelled like antiseptic and fear. I lined up the discharge dates with my own detailed notes from when Mark showed up on my porch. Something wasn't adding up. 2 days, I muttered, marking it on the wall. The hospital released them 2 days before he brought her here. Where were they for those 48 hours? And who was they, exactly? Mark had never mentioned Emily's mother, and I'd been too focused on keeping a newborn alive to press him about it back then. I spent the afternoon filing information requests with 3 different counties, cross-referencing every identifier Mark had used on the deed paperwork. My dining room table disappeared under stacks of documents. Each new piece of paper raised more questions than answers. The sun was setting when I wrote a note to myself. If Mark was hiding from something, what? I stuck it in the center of my timeline wall, right next to Emily's first birthday photo. In that picture, she's smashing cake with tiny fists, and I'm behind her, wearing the proudest smile you've ever seen. Mark wasn't in any of these memories, so why come back now? The front door opened around 6. Emily's keys jangled in that familiar way. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. Dad? She poked her head into the living room, eyes widening at my investigation wall. What's all this? Research, I said, moving to clear some space on the couch. Wanna sit? No pressure, just dinner and truth. She settled in, tucking her feet under her like she used to do during our weekend movie nights. Mark called again today. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Oh? His stories. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. They keep shifting. Little things, but yesterday he said he wrote me letters every month for the first year. Today it was every other month, and he couldn't remember which post office he used. I nodded slowly. I'm working on getting everything verified. All the documents, all the claims. Give me a few more days, and we'll sit down, all of us, and lay out every fact I find. No ambushes, no accusations. Just truth. Okay. She looked at my wall of evidence. Promise? Cross my heart. I meant it too. After 21 years of being her father, I wasn't about to start lying now. Later that night, after Emily went up to bed, I stood in front of my timeline again. One question kept drawing my eye, circled in red marker. Who is Emily's biological father? The paper trail was leading somewhere I hadn't expected. Maybe that's why Mark ran all those years ago. Maybe that's what he was running from now. I put another X on the calendar. 25 days left to find out. 9 days into this mess, and let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the moment your whole world shifts on its axis. You think you know what ground zero feels like? Wait till you're staring at DNA results that rewrite 21 years of history. The manila envelope had arrived just after lunch. Standard delivery, nothing special about it except the medical lab logo in the corner. I'd been expecting it, sure, but not what was inside. Not this. Remember those crime shows where they dramatically tear open evidence? This wasn't like that. My hands were steady as I sliced the envelope. Funny how the biggest moments sometimes feel the quietest. Inside was a stack of papers, charts, and numbers that boiled down to one impossible fact. Mark wasn't Emily's biological father. The thud of those papers hitting my desk felt heavier than any deed threat Mark had waved at me. I must have read those results 10 times, each pass making less sense than the last. You spend 2 decades believing something, building your life around it, and then boom, reality splits wide open. This can't be right, I muttered. But the numbers didn't change. The statistical certainty glared back at me. 99.99% exclusion. Mark's DNA profile, pulled from his recent medical records, showed no paternal match to Emily's genetic markers. My coffee went cold while I sat there, trying to process what this meant. Every photo on my wall, every memory of that night Mark showed up, it all looked different now. He hadn't just abandoned his daughter. He'd pawned off someone else's child. The shock must have shown on my face when I called Carl, because his first words were, "Jesus, Dan, you look like you've seen a ghost." Worse. I held up the results so he could see them through the video call. Mark's not her father. Never was. Carl's whistle cut through the speaker. Well, that explains a few things. But Dan, you've got to be careful here. This kind of news. He leaned closer to his camera. It could break her if you don't handle it right. I know. I rubbed my eyes. How do you tell someone their whole identity is built on a lie? Slowly, Carl said, and with a hell of a lot of love behind it. You've got the proof now. Use it smart. After we hung up, I made 3 copies of everything. 1 for the court, 1 for safekeeping, and 1 for Emily. I spent an hour organizing the documents, trying to find the gentlest way to present a truth that had no gentle edges. The house felt too quiet while I waited for her to come home. I paced between the kitchen and living room, rehearsing, words that kept falling short. How do you start a conversation that ends with, "Everything you thought you knew about your origins is wrong"? Around 7, I heard her key in the lock. My hands were trembling as I set the folder on the dining room table. The same table where we'd done her homework, celebrated birthdays, shared thousands of meals. Now it was going to host another kind of milestone. "Dad?" Emily walked in, still wearing her work clothes. She must have read something in my expression because she stopped short. "What's wrong?" I pulled out a chair for her, then sat down myself. The folder sat between us like a live wire. "I need to show you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But first, I want you to know that nothing, absolutely nothing, changes how much I love you or who you are to me." She glanced at the folder, then back at me. The worry in her eyes made my chest ache. "You're scaring me," she said softly. "I know, sweetheart." I rested my hand on the folder but didn't open it yet. "I've found something that changes everything we thought we knew about the night Mark brought you to me." Emily's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "What did you find that changes everything?" I slid the DNA results across the table, and for a long moment, Emily just stared at them. Her fingers traced the charts and numbers like she was trying to make them rearrange themselves into a different truth. "This can't," she swallowed hard. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Had it verified twice." I kept my voice gentle. "The lab compared his recent medical records with your genetic profile. There's no chance of error." The kitchen clock ticked away seconds that felt like hours. You know those moments when you'd give anything to take away someone's pain? This was one of them. Emily's shoulders trembled slightly, and without a word she reached across the table and gripped my hand. "He knew," she whispered. "All this time, he knew. Looks that way." I squeezed her hand back. "And now he's trying to claim rights he never had." Emily pushed back from the table and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun hit our old oak tree, the one we'd strung with lights every Christmas since she was little. For a second, watching her stand there, I felt so damn tired. Maybe it would be easier to just give Mark the house, walk away from the whole mess, let him have his hollow victory. The doorbell jolted me from that thought. Carl stood on the porch, looking more like a retired coach than ever in his worn denim jacket. His eyes had that steady look I remembered from tough games, the one that said we weren't done fighting yet. "Brought coffee," he announced, holding up a carrier. "Figure we could use it." Emily managed a weak smile as she took one of the cups. "Thanks, Coach Carl." We gathered around the dining room table, now covered with papers and folders. Carl took one look at Emily's face and knew she'd seen the results. "Your dad called me yesterday," he said, pulling up a chair. "Told me what you found out." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Now we finish these 30 days right, with truth." Something in his tone steadied me. Maybe it was hearing someone else say what I'd been thinking, or maybe it was just having backup when we needed it most. "Okay," I said, pulling out a legal pad. "What's our play?" For the next hour, we mapped it out. File our response to Mark's claims, with the DNA results front and center. Organize every scrap of evidence showing my role as Emily's father. Medical records, school forms, 21 years of being there. Request an emergency hearing before his 30-day deadline expired. Emily surprised me by taking charge of the documentation. "I'll scan everything," she said, voice stronger now. "Create a timeline. Show exactly when he was gone and when you were there. That's my girl." The words slipped out before I could catch them, but Emily's smile told me they were exactly right. Carl helped us outline our courthouse strategy while we worked. By evening, the dining room looked like a war room, with stacks of organized papers and a battle plan taking shape. "I'm staying here tonight," Emily announced as Carl was leaving. "Help get this ready." I nodded, throat tight with gratitude. We worked late into the night, the familiar rhythm of father and daughter falling into place like it always had. Next morning, day 13, I filed our hearing request first thing. The clerk looked over our paperwork and found us an opening the following week. I texted Mark the date and time, keeping it professional and brief. His response pinged back almost immediately. "See you when the judge sets things straight." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Emily. "We've got this, Dad. Truth wins." I stared at those two messages, threat and support, side by side on my screen. 13 days down, 17 to go. The courthouse would have its say soon enough. The courthouse steps gleamed with morning dew as Emily and I made our way up. My old leather binder, the one I'd used for 21 years of Emily's paperwork, felt heavy in my hands, but not as heavy as the moment. You ever notice how some buildings seem to hold their breath? That's how the courthouse felt that morning. We were early, just like I'd planned. The security guard, Bill, gave me a quick nod as we passed through the metal detector. I'd seen him around town enough times to know his kids' names, but today wasn't for small talk. "Courtroom 3, he said, gesturing down the hall. "Judge Harrison's already in." The hallway stretched out under fluorescent lights that made everything look a bit too stark, a bit too real. Emily walked beside me, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a determination that made my chest swell. Gone was the confused young woman from 2 weeks ago. In her place strode someone made of quiet steel, ready for whatever came next. Remember the sound of turning pages in a library? That's what filled courtroom 3. Just the dry whisper of papers being shuffled and arranged. A ceiling fan spun lazy circles overhead, its gentle whir mixing with murmured conversations. The room smelled of lemon polish and old wood, like every important decision ever made here had seeped into the panels. I set our binder on the plaintiff's table, each document tagged and color-coded exactly as Emily had organized them. Even now, I could picture her at our dining room table, methodically building our case piece by piece. Some of those nights, she'd worked later than I had, determined to get every detail right. "You okay?" I whispered. She squeezed my arm once. That was all I needed. The back door opened at exactly 9:30, and Mark strolled in like he was entering a board meeting. Same expensive suit, same practiced smile. He caught Emily's eye and gave her a little wave that made my jaw clench, but I kept my face neutral, focused. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about truth. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Harrison entered, his robe swishing as he took his seat. He was older than I'd expected, with wire-rimmed glasses and eyes that looked like they'd seen every trick in the book. "Good morning," he said, scanning some papers. "We're here regarding guardianship and property claims. Who would like to begin?" I stood, my chair scraping slightly against the floor. "Your Honor, I'm Daniel Mercer. I'd like to present our evidence first, if I may." The judge nodded, and I opened our binder. 21 years of fatherhood, laid out in chronological order. School registrations with my signature. Medical bills I'd paid. Photos of birthdays, graduations, ordinary Tuesday nights when I'd helped with homework. "And most importantly, Your Honor," I said, pulling out the DNA results, "we have laboratory confirmation that Mr. Mark Mercer is not Emily's biological father." Mark shot to his feet. "Objection. Those results are clearly forged. This is a desperate attempt to—" "Mr. Mercer," Judge Harrison cut in, "do you have evidence of forgery?" Well, no, but—" "Mr. Daniel Mercer," the judge turned to me, "can you authenticate these results?" I pulled out another folder. "Yes, Your Honor. We have complete chain of custody documentation, verified by 3 separate laboratories. The genetic profiles were drawn from recent medical records and confirmed through official channels." The judge held out his hand, and I passed everything forward. The ceiling fan kept spinning, marking time as he reviewed each page. The clock above his bench ticked so loudly, it felt like a metronome counting down to something final. Emily sat perfectly still beside me, her hands folded in her lap. Mark had stopped smiling. Judge Harrison set down the last page and removed his glasses. The room seemed to hold its breath as he cleared his throat. "Having reviewed the preliminary evidence," he began, "I am prepared to render my initial decision, based on the evidence presented." Judge Harrison continued, adjusting his glasses. "This court finds the following." He lifted a single sheet of paper, and I swear you could hear every heartbeat in that room. "First, Regarding the property claim, the deed presented by Mark Mercer shows significant irregularities in both notarization and filing dates. Moreover, bank records demonstrate no financial contribution from Mark Mercer toward the purchase of said property. The claim to ownership interest is hereby dismissed. My shoulders dropped about 2 inches. You know that feeling when you've been carrying something heavy for so long you forget what it's like to stand straight? Yeah, that's what hit me right then. Second, regarding the guardianship petition, the judge paused, glancing at Mark. Given the DNA evidence and complete absence of any parental involvement for 21 years, the court finds Mr. Mark Mercer has no standing to pursue custody or guardianship claims. That petition is also dismissed. Legal language can sound pretty dry, but let me tell you, those words "claims dismissed" landed like anchors in that courtroom, fixing everything I knew to be true right there in black and white. I let out a breath I'd been holding since that first night on the porch. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, meaning every syllable. When I looked at Emily, she had tears in her eyes, but her chin was high. I gave her the smallest nod, the kind only a father knows how to give, the kind that says everything without saying a word. Mark, though, I'd seen corpses with more color. That polished smile he'd worn like armor cracked right along his jawline. His hands gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles went white. "The clerk will provide stamped copies of this order," Judge Harrison concluded. "We're adjourned." The gavel crack echoed through the room like a period at the end of a very long sentence. You ever notice how courthouse hallways have this way of making whispers travel? As we waited for our copies, I could hear the murmurs spreading. Mark's name, the DNA results, the dismissed claims. In a small town like ours, news like this moves faster than people do. The clerk handed me our stack of stamped papers, official proof that truth sometimes wins clean and clear. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again, and again. Emily was talking to Carl near the water fountain, so I stepped aside to check the messages. First one was from Thomas & Reed Investment Partners. Urgent need to address recent revelations regarding Mark Mercer. Meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. to review ongoing business relationships. Another from Midwest Regional Bank. Please contact our office regarding status of pending transactions. The third just said, committee meeting called to review board positions in light of today's events. Each message read like a door closing. Remember what I said about small towns and news traveling fast? Well, it travels even faster in business circles when trust gets broken. I looked up to see Mark standing alone at the far end of the hallway, staring at his own phone. His face had gone from white to gray. He must have been getting the same kind of messages, or worse. The truth hadn't just won in court. It was already spilling out into every corner of Mark's carefully built world. Sometimes justice doesn't stop when the gavel falls. Emily walked over, her head held high like she'd grown another inch in the last hour. "Ready to go home, Dad?" That word, Dad, had never sounded more real, more earned than it did right then. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said, tucking the court papers into our binder. "Let's go home." Back home, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I'd set it on the kitchen counter while making coffee, and it kept dancing across the tile like it was trying to escape the avalanche of messages. Each notification brought another piece of Mark's world crashing down. "Daniel, in light of recent events, we must terminate Mark's position on the advisory board, effective immediately." That was from Riverside Community Bank. "Please be advised that all pending contracts with Mercer Consulting are under immediate review. Northwest Development Group. Given today's concerning revelations, we're suspending all business arrangements. Sterling and Partners." You know what's funny about watching someone's reputation implode? It happens in waves. First come the formal notices, all proper language and legal terms. Then the personal ones start rolling in, where people who'd smiled at Mark's jokes at charity galas suddenly remembered urgent appointments across town. Emily sat beside me at the counter, reading over my shoulder as another batch lit up the screen. I tried to close the email, but she put her hand on mine. "I want to see," she said quietly. "I need to understand who he really is." We watched together as the dominoes fell. Business partners who'd posed in photos with Mark now forwarded internal memos about maintaining distance. Charity boards requested his voluntary withdrawal. Country club membership under review. The really telling ones were the short messages, just quick forwards of conversations where people were desperately trying to prove they'd never really trusted Mark in the first place. Suddenly everyone always had concerns about his methods. 20 years of lies, Emily whispered, shaking her head. "And you just kept showing up every day, doing the real work. Remember that ache I mentioned earlier? The one that lifts when you finally put down something heavy? It came back then, but different, softer, like the last bit of tension finally letting go. Emily turned to me, her eyes clear and steady. You've always been Dad, not because some paper says so, but because you chose to be. Every single day. I had to look down at my coffee for a minute. Some moments hit harder than any court verdict. My laptop chimed. One final email from the Chamber of Commerce. The subject line read, "Emergency Board Meeting Results." Inside was a spreadsheet tracking how many business relationships had been suspended or terminated in the last 4 hours. They'd sorted them into neat little columns like they were tallying up the cost of trust. I closed the laptop and slid the court papers into our family binder, the one that held 21 years of report cards and birthday photos. The last page settled in with a satisfying finality. Felt right to end it there. With truth filing away, victory without fanfare. The house grew quiet as evening settled in. Emily had gone upstairs to call some friends, and I found myself standing at the kitchen window, looking out at our backyard. The maple tree we'd planted when she started high school swayed gently in the breeze. Something about watching it made me reach for a notepad. I started sketching out tomorrow. Pick up new gardening tools, visit Wilson's nursery for saplings, clear the front yard's west corner. Simple things, real things. The kind of work that puts down roots deeper than any paperwork could measure. You see, I'd learned something watching Mark's carefully built image shatter today. True strength isn't in what you show people. It's in what you quietly build when no one's looking. Tomorrow, I'd plant something that would grow long after all this noise had faded to memory. I set the notepad down and took a slow, steadying breath. The air felt cleaner somehow, like after a storm passes and leaves everything washed new. Morning hit different that day. You know that stillness after a storm passes? When the air feels scrubbed clean and everything stands a little sharper? That's what greeted me when I stepped onto the front porch, coffee steam rising in the cool air. The court order sat on my kitchen table, fresh ink still gleaming on the clerk's stamp. Next to it, a stack of letters and emails documented Mark's fall in neat, corporate language. Funny how fast a reputation can crumble when truth finally breaks through. I'd picked up the sapling from Wilson's nursery right when they opened. Old Tom Wilson himself helped me choose it. A young oak with strong roots and straight branches. Good choice, he'd said, running weathered hands over the leaves. These ones last generations. Wasn't lost on me, that part about generations. The tree lay carefully wrapped in burlap on my driveway, next to my old shovel and a coiled green hose. Emily came out. While I was measuring the spot, her sleeves already rolled up past her elbows. "Need help?" she asked, grabbing a spare shovel from the garage. You ever notice how some moments just feel right? Like pieces clicking into place after years of not quite fitting? We dug together, cutting a neat square in the front yard where everyone could see it. The morning sun warmed our backs as we worked, and I couldn't help thinking about another morning, 21 years ago, when a desperate knock changed everything. "We should mix in soil from all over," Emily suggested, wiping her forehead. "Make it really belong here." Smart kid. Always has been. So we did just that. Gathered earth from every corner of the yard. The flower bed where she'd planted marigolds in second grade. The spot under her bedroom window where she'd buried time capsules. The shady patch where she used to read during summers. Each scoop carried its own memory, its own piece of the life we'd built. When the hole was ready, we lowered the oak in together. Its root ball settled with a soft thump that felt more final than any judge's gavel. Emily started filling while I held it straight, making sure it faced the house just right. "Remember when you taught me about planting things?" she asked, tamping down the soil. "How you said you have to give them room to grow, but support them while they're finding their way." I nodded, throat tight. Sometimes your kids show you they were listening all along, even when you thought they weren't. The hose came next. I turned it on low, letting the water seep in slow and steady. No rush. Good things take time. The ground darkened as it drank, mud mixing with memories of midnight feedings and first steps and graduation tears. Standing back, I studied our work. The young oak stood straight and proud, its leaves catching morning light. From the street, anyone passing would see it, proof that something new had taken root where old shadows used to fall. My eyes drifted to the porch steps. That night felt far away now. The panic in Mark's voice, the weight of a newborn in my arms, the promise of just 1 week that turned into a lifetime. The woods still held those memories, but they didn't ache anymore. Emily looped the hose, task-minded like she's always been. "It's going to look good here," she said. But we both knew she meant more than just the tree. Water dripped from the oak's leaves as I gave it one final drink. Looking at my daughter, Because that's who she is, papers or not. I felt something settle deep in my chest. Real fathers show up, I said quietly, watching the water sink into soil that held 21 years of showing up every single day. The oak swayed slightly in the morning breeze, like it was nodding in agreement.